everyone. For all the parents who are watching this video, are your children engaged in their online science classes? Do your children studying sciences get enough opportunity to conduct tasks, observe, ask questions, touch, smell, experiment, and then share observations? Do you believe that online classes are a boon or a setback for hands-on learning? If you have these questions or similar questions, please stay with us for the next 30 minutes while we understand from educators on-ground challenges and benefits of teaching field of study such as sciences that need hands-on learning through online classes. My name is Pooja Kedia and I am from SchoolWiser. And today I am joined by educators from far, far away. We've got Meenal Thakur. Meenal is a New Jersey certified physics teacher working in a vocational technical school for the past 4 years. She has also worked with the New Jersey Department of Education to help them develop state-wise science assessment based on the NGSS, which is the next generation science standards. This aims at integrating 21st century skills in science classrooms as well as the state assessment. Meenal has also been developing skill-based physics curriculum for her school district with a focus on 21st century skills and inclusiveness. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Meenal, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Pooja, for having me.
I also have with me today Joanna Shuru. Joanna holds an MA in teaching from the Seton Hall University in New Jersey and has a bachelor's in toxicology from the University of Sciences in Philadelphia. Joanna has been teaching biology and chemistry at the Somerset County Vocational and Technical High for over 20 years. Joanna is currently a professional development leader and works very closely with administration to help teachers expand their knowledge and improve instruction standards. Thank you so much for being here today, Joanna. We look forward to an interaction with you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I also have with me today Ushma Mehta. Ushma is a science educator for 14 years, and she's taught both in India and in New Jersey. Ushma teaches physics and chemistry to high school children, which is essentially grade 9 to grade 12. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us today, Ushma.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, ladies. So let's just dive straight into it. If I may, I would like to start my discussion with you, Meenal, and I'd like to start with a very, very basic question. For our parents that are watching this video, please help us understand what is hands-on learning. Is it just being able to do things yourself, or does the ability to observe, to plan, to test a hypothesis, and then record observations virtually also qualify as hands-on learning?
Absolutely, Pooja. So hands-on learning, like the phrase itself has, it's hands-on, but it's also learning. So it's not just about, physically doing something or doing something on an online simulation, but it's also about observing a phenomena, trying to make sense out of that, trying to record some data, try to find some trends or uniqueness in that. And that all of that collection of data, all of that recording of data in a specified manner, again, then it's also about deciding, making decisions how you should record your data most effectively so that it can lead you to some conclusion. And finally, of course, leading all of that to inference. So it's a whole process of observing, recording data, and then finally making or deriving a conclusion out of that data.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that's a very valid point that you brought forward. I think parents, when they hear hands-on learning, it always in their head relates to, hands actually doing something and then getting, learning out of it. So thanks for clarifying that. What I hear you say is hands-on learning does not necessarily mean every child using their hands to do something, but essentially what that means is going through the entire process from inception to actually, during the process, having observations, having a hypothesis, and then testing it to say, is that true, is that not true, and what are the observations, and recording that.
Right.
Great.
I feel like the phrase is very misleading because instead of hands-on learning, it actually should be minds-on learning, because that's the whole process that's going into it. It's not necessarily your hands moving, but it's your mind hypothesizing and then collecting data, making inferences, and all of those skills.
All right, great. All right, so minds on learning is what we're going to be talking about today. Thanks so much for that, Meenal. Joanna, my next question is for you. Now, as a science educator, one of the key things that every child must get involved with is making sure that, well, there's minds on learning and there is a lot of experiment and or a lot of actually visualizing things themselves. So be it physics, be it biology, there is a lot of first time for the child when they're learning these subjects. So for them to be actually be able to see things really helps. Help us understand for subjects, such as biology, physics, and so on. How do you kind of replicate what you did in a physical classroom in the online environment?
Okay, so there are several ways that we can try to bring the classroom to the student through the computer in some way. There are many virtual interactive labs that we've been able to find where we can send the student link through their online platform, and then they can do the experiment along with others. Sharing demo videos, either of the teachers themselves doing the experiments or finding videos online where others have done the experiment. Films are actually a great way to do that, where something happens and you have the student watch that and then try to make sense of that. Because as Meenal said, it's all about trying to make sense of what the phenomena are. We will encourage students also to actually do some experiments on their own. Simple things, a lot of kitchen chemistry, so to speak, where you watch a chemical reaction by putting baking soda and vinegar together and seeing what happens, and then making those observations and trying to make sense of it and explaining it in some way. So those are some ways that we can kind of replicate a science experiment. It's about a mindset more so than having all the lab equipment and being professional scientists. It's not really about that. It's about thinking like a scientist.
Great, thank you so much. So help me understand. You mentioned that there is a lot of kitchen science, and I'll come to that in a bit. But there's also a lot of online resources that you kind of use to be able to either demonstrate how an experiment should work, or be a teacher actually performing the experiment online and the children observing it and asking questions. Now let's just come to the first part, which is using online tools to be able to demonstrate stuff to the children. Has that changed from when schools were open for physical classes? So, has the pandemic kind of brought this shift that you've had to rely a lot more on online resources, or was that anyway the norm?
I think it's brought it to the forefront. We have always used some online resources. For example, in the avenue of dissection, most schools don't, at least in my experience, are not doing the dissections in biology anymore, but the students are interested. Some students would prefer to do it themselves, have it right in front of them, but then due to the not availability of resources, also some people are opposed to that. Doing a simulation or watching someone else do it online is almost as good as actually being able to do it. So in that sense, we've always used those things. Now, since school is mostly online, we have to rely on that more. And fortunately, a lot of the science companies such as Flynn, they've stepped up to provide more of those interactive resources. So they're much more available, easier to find, and a lot more of them.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. So I think two key things for me from there is one, instead of saying that because of the pandemic, learning has to stop, we've said, let's go out in the forefront and find what we can and make sure that the learning continues. And you've mentioned there are some very good tools online which you can rely on, and they're almost as good as the actual experience. So it's kind of a step forward, but the real experience does offer the excitement or the feel to be able to do things yourself, may not always be able to be replicated in a virtual environment, is what I gather. Great, thank you so much. And you mentioned something about kitchen experiments, and I'd like to come to you, Ishma. One of the key things that we always want is safety and security of our children. Now, when we encourage our children to do these simple kitchen experiments, How does the school ensure safety of children without an educator's physical presence there?
Um, so given that we are using some unharmful chemicals like baking soda, vinegar, and like Joanna said, it's all kitchen chemistry. So we have them in our closets, maybe in the kitchen closets, use some cornstarch. And kids would be amazed to see what it does. And they can still learn the concepts like chemical reactions because they see the bubbling, they see that things are changing. They can still see the difference between what is a physical change versus a chemical change. So, you can use some of these simple materials, and especially with high school kids, I would say that just a bit of parents' presence should be enough. They should be fine with it because we are not dealing with any explosive or harmful chemicals over there, and you can't store them at home in at home environment anyways. So that's not what we are expecting. Um, we can also have them watch a demo video or some simulations, so we can have a combination of both. Have someone watch how to do it, then do it yourself if that is what would help you. Or as a teacher, you can be there, do it like a demo, and then have students do it, you know. And then, like Meenal said, it's more about minds on. So then wear your science caps and come up with your observations. What did you learn from the process? Um, so that's what I would say, make a best out of the online versus whatever physical resources that we have.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that makes complete sense. So you kind of give a child a hands-on feel of what reactions could look like, or that excitement you kind of create right next to their learning space, which is great. But does that also mean that as an educator, your kind of field kind of gets restricted? Because at school you might be looking at 5 different kinds of acids, some which might need a little caution when you're dealing with them, and they are not now, they can't be replicated in a virtual environment. So does that make you feel that your in terms of the width of what you did with children actually being there vis-a-vis what you're able to do virtually, there is a difference?
There is definitely a difference between even like teaching a class virtually versus being in person, because you get that feedback, that students are getting it, the feel, the physical presence. That makes a lot of difference, obviously. But given that we are science community, we try to use our innovations in the given situation. So we still don't want to bear kids not have this experience at all and not have to do labs at all. um, so yes, I agree that there is limitation, but they can still learn about, vinegar being an acid. You probably can give them some kind of uh, have them come up with some ideas, maybe have them use red cabbage juice or something, and still have them get the feel of what an indicator and how it would work. Use some house cleaners to explain what is acid versus base, kind of a
Right.
thing. um, or have them do some project based learning and give them choice, because trust me, in all these years of my experience, what I have experienced is kids are very creative.
Right.
So, they when it comes to thinking, they can think more than you, like I know about that, teaching physics as well as chemistry. They have great ideas, so this is the time when it's more of building skills than just learning facts. Yes, they are learning facts, but then it's also more about learning in the given situation how you are going to handle that, um, come up and overcome challenges. So those are some of the skills that they are learning as well, I think.
Great, thank you so much. And I think you made a very valid point there, and that's kind of also spilling over to what Meena is kind of looking at in terms of making sure that you integrate things like life skills and sciences. So don't just look at this as a task, as an experiment that needs these 5 steps and all 5 steps done and tick, but look at the entire process and try and see what is it that you're learning. So you don't have a particular substance that you need. What are the alternates that you possibly have, and how does that alternate react when you mix it with the experiment, and what those observations are. So thank you so much for that, Ushma. Meenal, my next question is for you. Often you see that not every household is the same. Now, when you kind of sit down with children and you say, all right, we're going to perform an experiment today, do you sometimes feel that sourcing simple material, which ideally should be present in every kitchen, also seems like an uphill task? And when that happens, how do you kind of jump on your feet and make sure that experiential learning or hands-on learning actually goes to each child, even if they don't actually have the material required?
Well, that's definitely true. It is a task, definitely. But I would say we would try and leverage that situation, and we like to practice and appreciate another 21st century skill. In that case, that is creative resourcefulness. So what we do before, and this adds kind of an extra layer of challenge and brings the real world into our classroom, because budget is always a constraint. So even when you are professionally, if you are attempting to any project, there's always a budget constraint. So that's what we bring into our projects. So what we do is, before we begin any project, students, they sit in small teams or in breakout rooms in Zoom, and they decide what we call is BOM, B-O-M, which is bill of materials. So they sit together, and for the first 20 minutes, they just sit and decide what are the allowed materials that they will use for the projects. And that kind of gives them an opportunity to work on a budget, but also express your opinions, exercise your reasoning skills, try and figure out alternatives. So, hey, maybe I do not have a physical newspaper, but maybe I have, printer paper available. So I can substitute that with, some other kind of material. Then you have to convince others. If something is not available to you, you have to convince others, or again, make alternatives, show them, oh, maybe we can use something else. And finally, come to a consensus as a team and give me a BOM. So they present to me a bill of materials, and that's an actual graded activity in our project. So that kinds of, we're appreciating the fact that there's always constraints, and we're appreciating the fact that kids need to be more creative when it comes to online learning.
Lovely. Very, very encouraging. Help me understand, from what grade do you start this BOM? Does it happen for junior classes as well, or only for senior classes?
Well, I teach in a high school. So for us,
Okay.
It's 9 to 12. And they are 9 to 12 students. They're very capable of, developing their own material list. But we do, as educators, like, we'll go into each breakout rooms and guide them. Sometimes they're stuck. They don't know, like, they see the project, they know what they have to do, but they are not, they are completely clueless about what materials they could use. And then we pitch in a little bit more suggestions there, but mostly it's them. It's completely them.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. And I think what you've said is very true to real life situation. Life does not bring everything to you on a platter. You need to innovate. You need to figure out, what you can use, what you can't use. You always are restricted by budgets. It's great that we're giving our children that environment already in school, which kind of gets them life ready. What you mentioned about breakout rooms kind of does spill over my next question. And I was going to come to you, Ushma, with my next question, which is that typically what we see in physical classrooms, the environment is that you've got a class of 15, 20, 30, whatever the number may be. You essentially break children down in smaller numbers for them to be able to practically do experiments, make observations, and then also have different observations across the class for them to come collectively and share how different things reacted differently, or what different observations or perspectives are like. Essentially, in the virtual environment, are you able to do that effectively?
Yes, and there are limitations, but like Meenal said, that is something that we are experimenting. I totally agree with her, like with the breakout rooms, etc. And even if we were in person in these challenging times, I would think that there has to be some social distancing, etc. So we can't expect them to be the same, even when we do labs, we can't really, that is something that is a limitation in given point, even when we are in person. So that is something we will have to be more vigilant about. So we do have to rely upon and find some of these technology that we can use, have a shared Google Slides, shared Google Documents, etc. And we can still have them work in group and have come up with a shared product. But then we are relying more upon technology than just being in person or just doing it on a piece of paper with their pens and pencils that they would do otherwise.
All right, great. I think we are kind of slowly moving into an environment where that reliance on technology is inevitable, and I think we can't really run away from that. So it's great that we kind of slowly edging towards seeing how we can use that best. Joanna, my next question is for you. We mentioned during your introduction that you help teachers expand their knowledge and improve instruction material, and as a part of that, I think one of the key things is identifying good sources of content which you can take to children. Help me understand, are there any recommendations that you have in terms of great online tools which you think are great simulators for what an educator would do online visually?
There are hundreds of sources, and for all of us, I think we would agree that it can be overwhelming. Every day we're all bombarded with emails for try this new online source, try that new online source. So sorting through the barrage of that can be overwhelming. So
okay, let me on that note, let me change my question then.
Okay.
Help me understand your key tips to children who are going through these sources and trying to do filter through this mammoth task of trying to find a good resource online. What's your key 1-2 tip to children or parents who are looking for resources? How do they identify a good resource vis-a-vis average resource?
Okay, so if I was a parent trying to help my child figure out what resources, first I would ask my teacher. Like, ask the teacher what they recommend, what they feel comfortable with, what they've used in class, what has worked for them. That would be step one. Step two might be, if you want to explore a little farther, I would say go with names that sound familiar. Like Biology Corner is a good example. Biology Simulations is another. PhET simulations work very well. Really, the best thing to do is to try it out and see if things make sense. Now, I would also caution anyone is when you go into the realm of videos, you have to be very careful as to where people are getting their information from. So also look for what sources the person who is creating the content has used to put that particular video or information together. Really checking sources is very important right now.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that's extremely valuable. You've summed it really beautifully. So for all the parents who are looking at this video, Joanna has put together 3 key elements that you want to look at. Ask, which is make sure that you go to your educators, because they have probably seen those and a lot many more, and they've dived into it and they have a sense of what is going to kind of fall in line with what the child's curriculum covers. So definitely ask your educator. Second is try. So go ahead, try it out, see what how good is it in terms of user interface, how comfortable your child is, and you'll get a sense very quickly if it's a good resource. And the third is if try and understand if it's a familiar name. Likelihood is if it is a familiar name, it is a big brand, they would have put in enough resource, enough research into making sure that the content which is there it kind of fits the bill and is something which children will be able to benefit from. So thank you so much for that. And I think you also mentioned one last bit, which is to make sure that the content which is there is reliable. And I think children today are fairly savvy to try and understand where the resource kind of comes from and to check its credibility. Thank you so much. We've kind of come to the end, 5 minutes. It's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. I think you've been extremely to the point, given us a fair amount of insight. And there is a mixed bag of sense that I get in terms of virtual classes, virtual physical classes. But I think the overall sense that I do see is that everybody's kind of taken on this hands-on learning in the virtual environment very, very positively. And there are truly some benefits that the virtual medium has to offer. If I could now come to each one of you with your closing thoughts, and if you could just pen down your key tips for children's and teachers to make sure that, how do you make sure that teaching sciences experientially online is effective? What would they be? Meena, would it be all right if I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So I think we all would agree that technology at this time cannot be ignored. And kids, they're born in this technology. So I think it's more onto teachers and administrators now to embrace that, try and figure out as many new resources, as many new technological tools to get to, make sure that you are able to bring that real worldness or the real classroom experience to your online platform. So I would say encouraging and exploring a lot of technology. But then another thing that my students keep telling me that they miss is getting physical, running about or roaming around in classroom, having fun with their friends, making jokes, and laughing at their silly mistakes. So bringing that kind of an environment, I feel like maybe starting classes with some music and a little bit of, physical exercise or dancing, having sunshine or happy hours built into your classroom where we're just, sitting and relaxing and talking to each other, or getting to know each other, making fun, having fun, getting to know about each other's opinions, struggles, whatever it could be, just talking time and not just strictly keeping it to academic, I think can make it a lot more real than what we currently are doing in an online class.
Great, thank you so much for that. Meenal has stuck to her passion, which is making sure that there is a lot of life skills engaged with academics. And I think she's made a point clear that learning is best achieved when the child's mind is switched on, which will only happen when they're present, not just physically, but also in their entirety. So thank you so much for that, Meenal. Ushma, if I could come to you with your closing thoughts, please.
Yeah, sure. Meena pretty much covered most of it, and I completely agree with her. Don't just emphasize on academics. Yes, it is important, but in given situation, it's important to understand and be able to relate to what and how kids are feeling. And teachers being an important part, they do share, and we do have to do some of that ice breaking so that they still mingle upon with and know their classmates, and still be able to build that rapport even if we are online or virtual.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Ushma. Joanna, if I could also get you to comment specifically on how do you make hands-on learning online successful?
So I would say from a teacher's perspective is if students have, the more choices they have, the more opportunity they have to learn things, because they'll feel a sense of passion about it. They have some buy-in, and they want to learn things if they've chosen how they're going to do it and how they're going to present what it is they've learned. Also, for students, I would say have some fun with whatever it is you're doing. Be curious, have a sense of adventure. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you can always try it again. And as we know, we learn best from the mistakes that we make. And don't be afraid to get a little messy, because science, hands-on especially, can be pretty messy.
All right, great. I love that message. And it doesn't seem like it's very different from what it would be if you were in a physical environment. So make sure you keep your curiosity hat on, make sure you're kind of ready mentally to get started with stuff. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, and kind of be there to truly experiment. Thank you so much for that, all three of you. It has been a very interesting session today. And based on what I hear from all of you, I think, if I were to kind of sum it up, the sense that I get is that limitless learning is truly possible in a virtual environment. Students are able to experiment, explore, learn in ways that may not always be possible in a traditional environment. But given that, I also hear that there is a fair amount of physical presence that has a positive impact on learning. So I think the way we're kind of looking at education anyway, I think blended learning is going to be the way ahead, is going to be the way forward. Once again, a big thank you to you, Meena, big thank you to you, Ushma, and to you, Joanna. On that note, I'm going to call it a wrap. Goodbye until we meet again. Be safe, be informed, and be SchoolWiser. Thank you, ladies.